Hello, my name is Christine Healy, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in oncology here at Moffitt for over 21 years. Today, I'd like to talk about self-care for caregivers. I start out with saying if you've joined this call today, you're halfway there. And I say that because I find that caregivers have a very difficult time asking for help, recognizing they need help, or even just having the time. And so I want to start off with talking about who really are the caregivers. We're spouses, partners, adult children, siblings, sometimes young children, or it could be a friend. I think it's important to point that out because I think having a cancer patient in your life, you're affected, whether you're doing the heavy lifting as a caregiver or it's a friend. It affects you to watch someone you love be dealing with cancer. So it's really important to recognize that. Why is this important? Because you are involved. Whatever your relationship is, you're connected. You love someone going through a very difficult emotional journey, and it's one that very much affects you. There are many, many challenges with being close to a person who has cancer. And if you're in a caregiver situation, you may have been brought into the situation when you weren't very comfortable. You might even feel somewhat resentful. Caregiving responsibilities often appear with very little warning. Why should your life change so drastically? You may have been encouraging a person to take care of themselves, and they didn't. You may feel that they aren't handling things the way you would be handling them. You may have feelings that you're not comfortable with, like anger, resentment, even anticipatory grief. Why is your life changing? You still have to work. You still have to do all the things that you've been wanting to do, yet suddenly your life has changed. Caregiving takes a toll physically and emotionally. This can include sleeping difficulties, fatigue, exhaustion, changing in eating habits, stress-induced illnesses, fear, anxiety, loneliness, depression, isolation, anger, and sadness. All of these things might be affecting you in one way or another. Another challenging part of being a caregiver is you have competing roles. You want to be a good caregiver to your patient, but you also recognize the toll it's taking on you, and you'd like to be a good caregiver to yourself. They're not always aligned. And often the patient's need comes first. Many issues arise. Many caregivers will say, how will I meet the challenges of taking care of my loved one? I haven't been trained to do this. How will I meet the challenges of caring for myself? Will I have the knowledge and skills? Do I have to stop working? Am I able to continue to see my friends? Will I ever have free time? How will I help my children cope? What will I do if I'm left alone? Other concerns are, why am I so angry? And I think that's often not expressed easily because you don't necessarily feel entitled to being angry. After all, you don't have cancer. And I find some caregivers have difficulty owning a lot of different emotions that they're feeling because they don't feel entitled to them. You may wonder, how long is this going to go on? Why do I have such difficulty asking for help? And why is self-care so difficult for me? This is where I feel we should start at the beginning. There's many opportunities for you to look around and see how self-care would be beneficial. But why is it that it feels so inaccessible? I think it's important to sort of take a deep dive and look back at, have you ever been a caregiver before? And if so, at what age? Sometimes we start caregiving at very young ages. Was it thrust upon you? Did you have an ill parent? Or did you have a sibling who was ill? What was that experience like? Were you expected to do things that maybe weren't appropriate for your age? Were there positives and negatives involved? And the positives are sometimes, did you get a lot of positive reinforcement for being a big helper? Or was it negative that you lost out on doing a lot of things that you really wanted to do but couldn't, or felt very guilty about not being able to do those things? Did you feel you had a choice? Did your place in the family determine your role as a caregiver? Were you the oldest sibling? Did you have to take care of your younger siblings? Did you have a parent that was ill or had mental illness or alcoholism issues? Have you become a serial helper? And I think a serial helper is someone who really just doesn't know how to set limits for themselves and say no, because they've gotten a lot of positive reinforcement for being a caregiver and being very helpful. I think it's important to really understand how to get to the point of accessing self-care. You have to understand how to sort of strengthen your own pillars of self-care. And I think number one is self-knowledge. I think it's really important to understand who you are, how you react to things, what you're capable of, what you know you don't want to do, what's really challenging for you, and whether you are willing to learn how to do things or you feel like you have to learn things, and sort of how comfortable you are even in that process. I think another piece of the self-care is self-protection. Are you a person who has difficulty saying no? I think that we've learned that we sort of have to step up in very difficult times, and often it's challenging to really know when it's okay to say no and when I can take care of myself, or how it's going to impact someone else. And communication. So I'd like to break these down a little further. With regard to self-knowledge, how honest are you being with yourself? Do you feel that you can be honest with yourself? How aware are you of the things you're finding challenging? How have you handled stress now, or have you handled it in the past? These are very often indicators of how you will handle things now. How ready are you to begin the process of self-care? It's really easy to say, yeah, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I know I need to. But to actually take the steps to begin to do that is more challenging. How do you handle free time now? Do you see your time as valuable? Are you able to say no and stand firm, or at least say, I'll get back to you? Are you able to delegate to others when things begin to mount up? And communication is very important. If you've been in a relationship with someone where you didn't have the best communication in the past, it's not necessarily going to improve with a more challenging situation. If you're a person who has a need to please others, that may transfer into your caregiving. How do you deal with conflicts? And conflict may arise. It may arise with siblings. If you're caring for a parent, it may arise with a parent. It may arise between parents. Are you comfortable with conflict, or does everything need to be sort of swept under the rug? Are you able to discuss what your needs are in a situation? Do you even recognize what your needs are? And do you feel guilty when asking for what you need? And then there's communication with the patient. Where do I begin? How do I begin a discussion when he or she never wants to talk about it? I don't want to upset her or him. How do you have these difficult discussions with someone you care about? Do you feel that if you bring up a discussion about the person's treatment or progression of their disease, do you think that he or she will think you're not being positive or that you've given up? Are you allowed to sort of talk about that you have needs in this relationship too? Or does it feel like the patient shuts down every time you want to talk about it? It's really important to develop a toolkit. We talk about toolkits all the time for patients, and caregivers need a toolkit just as much. And a toolkit is a flexible, thought out, deliberate list of go-to fixes and activities which help you soothe, relax, release, and restore. If you think of the balance between being a caregiver or having a person who's very sick in your life and how much stress that causes you, it makes sense that you need to balance that with opportunities for you to relax and release and feel that you can get comfortable enough to do whatever you need to do, whether it's take care of the patient or take care of yourself. But if the weight is heavily on the stress of caregiving, you may run into some struggles or even get physically sick yourself. One of my favorite parts of SelfCare is utilizing caller ID. Let's face it, there's many times when calls come in and you don't have the time or interest to talk to that person, whether it's about the patient or whether it's about something that you don't want to deal with. But utilizing caller ID gives you a choice. It empowers yourself in saying, either not now, not ever, or a little bit later. Utilizing caller ID gives you some space that you can take your time. You don't have to respond every time someone calls you. Creating a self-care toolkit is vital because it has a variety of options for a variety of situations. Do you have 10 minutes, an hour, or the afternoon to truly focus in on just your needs and yours alone? And are you able to allow yourself to do that? I find that when people have free time, especially caregivers who have a lot to do, when they do finally get to free time, there's so many things they think they should do or may want to do, they can't even begin to think about what they want to do. And I'm not talking about chores. I'm talking about taking time for yourself. It's really important to sit in a quiet place and think about what makes you happy. I think that we've lost touch with that over time because everything is go, go, go and multitasking, so that for you to actually sit down and think about what brings you joy, it may be quite a challenge. It's really important too to recognize that what brought you joy maybe years ago may not bring you joy anymore. Maybe you always love to cook, but suddenly you're cooking and you're making meals that don't feel like they're meals that you want to make, so you've lost interest. It's really important to make a list, literally, of what brings you joy. It could be a pedicure. It could be a walk in the park. It could be beautiful music. It could be a glass of wine. It could be anything within the realm of what you find pleasurable. And it's important to have the list at the ready, because I find that when you do finally get the time to relax, it's so overwhelming, it's hard to figure out what it is you really want to do. You may be so conscious of using the time in the way that's really going to serve you that you can't even make that decision. And your needs change constantly over days, weeks, and it's really important to edit the list often, to give yourself an opportunity to really dig down deep into what restores you, what revives you, what makes you happy. And you may try some things and it doesn't help at all. We have a meditation group. Some people love it. Some people try it and think, This is not for me. It's really important to challenge yourself with things that maybe you've never done before, or maybe you'd like to revisit from the past. So it's also important to realize that Moffitt is here to support you as well as your patient. So if you would like to speak with your patient's social worker, you can contact the social work department at 813-745-8407. Your social worker will give you many options in terms of self-care as well as support programs that we offer here at Moffitt. If you'd like more information on the Moffitt's library programs, please contact patientlibrary@moffitt.org or 813-745-1690. In addition to many of the Meet the Experts programs offered by the library, there's also the patient and family orientation, which gives an excellent overview of many of Moffitt's resources. And as I said, you can view the upcoming Meet the Expert sessions at moffitt.org/meettheexperts.